you're admittedly the Mets guy, or Mets guy. In my opinion, you're the Mets guy at Barstool, because I could give a fuck less about Kevin's fandom. Any team he roots for sucks. So
He's a mush.
Following him about sports sucks. He's more entertaining about anything else but sports, in my opinion. But you're also you are a you have no genre you fit into. You hang out with a little kid and Robbie Fox, and you hang out with a guy who should be in the retirement home and large. Yep. You hang out with a literal psychopath and Frank the Tank, and so you fit every demographic, which is great. But you're a big Marvel, you're a big comic book guy, so I need to hear like the origin story of Clem, because some people on this podcast are big stoolies, some people are casual, but a lot of our listeners, they may not know who you are at all. So I mean, you don't got to go back to like your daddy sack, but give us like the full origin story.
Yeah, sure. Kind of how I ended up at this crazy, wacky place that I'm working, or is that what you're looking for? Just a life story? Yeah. It's one of those funny things. So growing up, my dad was a big music fan growing up. He was a drummer. He he owned his own business. He installs pools and stuff like that. Still grinding to this day. God bless him. But he was always a music guy. And for some reason, I just like sports growing up. I don't know what it was. My uncles were my mom's brothers were kind of into sports and whatever. But it was just one of those things that I could look at like a sports almanac and just look at stats for hours, not know what half the shit even meant. Just loved it. So from that day on, from my childhood on, the 80s Mets I grew up with, I don't remember the 86 World. My first memory as a Mets fan, this is the God's honest truth, was I remember going to bed. I knew it was a big game in the playoffs. It was the 88 Mets facing the Dodgers. And I remember the next morning I woke up and I was like, did the Mets win? Or because I was, I'm not staying up for a playoff game at that age. And I remember I had a tear in my eye and I'm like, I feel like this is like a sign that they lost. Sure enough, Mike Socha game. Anyone who knows the Mets-Dodgers series, Socha hits the home run. So that was a good introduction to what Mets fandom was going to be like for the rest of my life, right? I am a Giants fan too, which a lot of people think is weird because it's usually Mets, Jets, Giants, Yankees. For some reason, you can only be happy or sad here in New York. By the grace of God, I chose the Giants. My dad's one slight fandom growing up was the Giants. So I got to be a Giants fan. I remember the Bills Super Bowl. That was my first real memory as a football fan. Obviously, I've had some Super Bowls since then as a fan, which is awesome. But my whole life was I just want to get into sports. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I just want to do it. That's kind of my process for anything in life is just figure it out as you go, right? Guess and check. And I ended up, I graduated high school, went to Seton Hall for a year to be a sports management major. Absolutely hated the college because it was a commuter college, so it was everyone going home on the weekends. I just wanted to have fun, party a little bit because I hear college is the best 4 years of your life. Get a degree in sports management and figure it out from there. Ended up transferring to Siena a year later because I had a buddy up there. Visited him once, had a great time. I said, let's just get a business degree and we'll figure it out from there. And then a bunch of weird odd jobs in the sports industry, just trying to get to lock in somewhere. My first job out of college was selling New York Liberty basketball tickets. You know how hard it is to sell New York Liberty basketball tickets? It's impossible to sell New York Liberty. And it was group sales too. So it's not like I'm just trying to sell to I have to sell to groups of 20 or more. I think it was considered a group thing. And I think after 3 months or so, they told me I had set the record for most tickets sold by a temp or whatever in a 2-week period because I hit this one Girl Scout troop that wasn't spoken for by the Girl Scout person at the company, and I just got flush with sales. I still was operating in the red, commuting from home all the way down to the city on the train. So I was yeah, maybe this isn't the one for me. Ended up getting a job at customer service with Sporting News, which, sportingnews.com, that makes me feel like a fossil. I bet a lot of younger people who are listening have no idea, but it was kind of like a Sports Illustrated competitor, right? Yeah. Did some fantasy game testing and customer service. So our site would always go down at 12:55 p.m. on Sunday, every single week during the football season. You get a million angry emails. Think about if you want to switch out, LaDainian Tom, you want to send up Danny Thomas to Tiki Barber for some reason. Can't do it. Just get angry emails. Started to test stuff to try to figure out how we could not get all those emails. They ended up moving to Charlotte. My wife, my now wife, then girlfriend, told me there's no way my ass is moving to Charlotte because she doesn't want to move to Charlotte. So then I ended up lucking into a job at ESPN doing that kind of stuff, testing. It was a quality assurance job.
What?
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
ESPN?
I worked for the mothership, the worldwide leader, top 3 enemy of Dave Portnoy at some point of his life, maybe number. I don't know if anyone trumps Goodell, so I'd say ESPN is probably 2.
They're definitely on the Mount Rushmore of enemies. That's for damn sure.
Definitely.
You were at ESPN?
I was at ESPN 2008.
Holy
My first weekend up there, it was I went to Bristol for like training, and it was the Giants Cowboys NFC divisional game, I remember. And it was like little did I know I was going to be on like the highest high of my life in sports for like the next 3 weeks between the Packer game and then Super Bowl 42 against the Pats. And I was there for let's see, 08 to 13, so 5 years or so, doing testing, quality assurance, yada, yada, yada. And then they ended up being like, hey, you're going to have to move out to Bristol. And my wife was like, you're not moving to Bristol. And I could have done the commute. It would have sucked. It's like an hour plus each way, but then there's always traffic and stuff in the morning. She told me that probably wasn't going to be the case. So I did this thing. I took my severance, and it was straight out of a movie, man. I swear to God. I had a wife. I had a house with a mortgage with I think 29 years left on it. I had a wife, and a wife who had just peed on a stick that said she was pregnant. So it was like I had those 3 things, and the one thing I didn't have was a job at that point. So it was straight out of like a movie. And I remember Portnoy had blogged a thing. It was like one of his blogs he would put up every 6 months. Like, I want you. It was the Uncle Sam looking thing. It's like, if you want to blog for us, act like you have a blog here and blog on every single minute you have a moment. And once you think you have enough stuff, submit it, blah, blah, blah. And I had, talked with some of the different writers and bloggers at Barstool, which was a lot less people, at this point, 2013 than it is now, obviously.
What's your employee number?
What?
What's your employee number?
We got shirts way back when, and it was 16 at the time.
Holy
and
shit.
Out of those 16, I'd say I might be 10ish now. You know what I mean? Because some of the older guys have left, but I was 16. And that's, people have come and gone throughout them, but that's what I got was number 16, which is crazy. And it was, I always make this comparison. You guys seem like some of you are a little bit closer to my age. I always make this comparison. It was basically like Howard Stern in Private Parts, which you guys have seen that, where he's just like, fuck it. I got nothing to lose right now. And I would always do that, man. I'd always I used to just do like the hot takes, very basic sports takes whenever I do something. I was like, you know what? I have nothing to lose here. Let me just start talking like a Barstool employee. You just kind of like let it rip. So that's what I did. And I had, hit it off with some of the guys, just tweeting at them, kind of develop your friendships on Twitter and stuff like that. And after probably about a year or so, Brendan Clancy, Kevin's brother, had said, hey, man, we love what you do. We have this KFC radio podcast we do. They had KFCradio.com, and that was before, podcasts were really as huge as they became. And Barstool, this is before churn and all that stuff. Dave barely even acknowledged podcasts existed. And he was like, hey, if you want to write for us, it would be a way to get people to come to our site, KFCradio.com, get people to listen to the podcast. So I kind of it was like almost like going to the minor leagues. So I would blog for their podcast site. And then after probably about 4 months or so, Kev said, hey, listen, like what you're doing there, like, your blog, you kind of have the, voice of Barstool. If you want to write about the Knicks, you can be my Knicks writer, which, we always have these team-centric writers, especially back then when it was city-based. And then anytime you see anything on a weekend, on a Saturday, he's like, Saturdays are pretty much a dead day. A lot of people are out, actually living their lives. If you see something that's funny, that's good, that's bloggable, blog it, hit submit, and then I'll, publish it if I think it's worthy of going up on the blog. So that was basically it. I blogged my butt off with the Knicks. I think Porzingis got drafted. I think he might have gotten drafted that next year. So I had Porzingis, I had the Phil Jackson nonsense, Derek Fisher, which was like a gold mine of content. And then every single moment I saw something that was like worthy of a blog, I put it up on a Saturday. And a year later, 2015, Dave Portnoy reached out to me and said, hey, man, Kev said, you're good at this. I want to think about hiring you. Big Cat spoke highly of you. And I think at that point, the churning money looked like it was either if it would be churning or someone else's money was going to come in. They're like, we'd love to have you, bring you on and whatever. And I was like, hell yeah. I was at that point, I was actually working at USA Today, doing some stuff on their app. I was doing kind of like editorial work. I had lucked into that job in between working at my dad's store after my wife had gotten knocked up by me and hit me with you're having a baby. So I kind of did that to make ends meet. Worked at USA Today doing editorial stuff where I worked like the 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift most of the time if the people in LA couldn't do it. So that was a lot of fun with a baby at home. And Dave ended up calling. 2015 got hired, and here I am. So very long-winded way to say that's how I got here.
And maybe soon we'll hire you at the Anomalies because
I'm in, man.
we're on the way up. We got you on the podcast, so now like we're kind of coming back up. We had Willie, we had Large, that we were kind of on the way down. We got you now. We're turning the corner.
Well, Tanner was like, "What do I got to get you on the podcast?" I got
Sure.
Large on. I'm like, just whatever you offer, Large. Just offer me a little more, like pleases or whatever it may be.
Hey,
And,
I think I was way more late for Large than I was for you, if that makes you feel better.
I don't know if it makes you feel better or worse though. It's like you're the late guy. I kind of wish